What's going on, y'all? We back. Another video, another day. Y'all know who I am. Do y'all know who y'all are? I know who I am. You know who you are? Well, I'm gonna do a video, man. I'm gonna do this video right here. I'm gonna add something to it myself. You know, you have that one friend. I'm gonna give you a little backstory, right? I got like some close friends. You know, they're white and awesome people, amazing people. I can't say anything bad about them. But you know, sometimes as you get older, you get a little what is it called? The one I'm looking for. Separation from reality sometimes. Because you might have had it hard in your particular life and you made it to a good point. You think everything's the same way and you don't never see a gray area. So we're gonna do the white slavery thing right here. I never even heard of this. Well, I watched this video, but we know it's white. The word slave comes from Slavic. We all know that it was slaves first. But when we talk about slavery, the minute it was the treatment of the slaves. That's what people don't realizing. The treatment of the slaves, bro. Guys, you were slave when the Moors, when the black Moors and the Asiatic Moors came into Europe, they brought schools, bathhouses, all these things, mathematics, everything to help them out to bring up their knowledge and increase their civilization. They didn't feed their babies to gators and all that type of stuff. It's the treatment of the people. That's all I'm saying, bro.
Slavery is as old as human civilization, dating back beyond recorded history, and it exists even still today. Every culture on every continent practiced some form of slavery, whether it was serfdom, indentured servitude, or collective peasantry. However, when the slave trade is mentioned, people normally think of the black African slave trade to the Western Hemisphere during the colonial period from 1500 to the mid-1800s, as practiced by the European colonial powers. Estimates range from 10 to 13 million Africans being brought to the New World, with around 10 million surviving to be sold in North and South America, as well as in the Caribbean islands. Of this number, the best estimate is that 450,000 went to the British, French, and Spanish colonies in what is now the United States and Caribbean. Brazil alone received almost 5 million, the rest going to the Spanish colonies in South America. Slavery still exists in the world, yet most of the major powers ignore the fact and refuse to even acknowledge that it still exists. It is still quite active. Yet, 6 decades before the American Civil War, a war was fought by the United States on foreign shores to try and stop the white slave trade. What was the white slave trade? Does it still exist? Who were the Barbary pirates? What was the result of American intervention? How did it occur, and what was the aftermath? And how did 9 U.S. Marines and their mercenaries make history and give birth to a legendary fighting force while also ending the white slave trade in North Africa?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, history professor, historian, and book author. And we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
During the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the world was on fire, as France and Britain were engaged in the Napoleonic Wars, which was another series of conflicts just like the 7 Years' War, again involving every nation in Europe. The 7 Years' War was also known as the French and Indian War in the United States. Both these conflicts were fought on every continent and on every colony. Even during these protracted wars, the transatlantic slave trade continued. It was big business. While the European powers were destroying each other, Thomas Jefferson became the 3rd President of the United States from March 4, 1801 to March 4, 1809, and he had several major issues to contend with. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 from France doubled the size of the United States. The Yazoo territorial disputes in western Georgia were hotly contested. The launching of the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1804 to explore the newly acquired country, and the contested issue of slavery. In 1806, Jefferson denounced the international slave trade as a violation of human rights and called upon Congress to criminalize it. Congress responded by approving the act prohibiting importation of slaves the following year. No longer could slaves be brought from Africa, although slavery was still legal in the United States. Then there were also the rising tensions between the United States and Great Britain, which dominated the final years of Jefferson's second term, as the Royal Navy had been seizing American merchant ships and impressing sailors. However, one situation which has gone largely unnoticed in history was Jefferson being the first president to send the military overseas into direct action. The war against the Barbary pirates. For decades prior to Jefferson's accession to office, the Barbary Coast pirates of North Africa had been capturing foreign merchant and warships, stealing their valuable cargoes and enslaving crew members, while often demanding huge ransoms for their release. Many of these ships and crews were American. Before independence, American merchant ships were protected from the Barbary pirates by the naval and diplomatic influence of Great Britain, which had threatened the use of military force should their ships be molested. However, that American protection came to an end after the colonies won their independence. The Barbary pirates also attacked the coastal northern Mediterranean, launching attacks against France, Italy, and Sicily, kidnapping women as white slaves, primarily and whenever possible, notable wealthy persons and ships for ransom. In their feverish search for white women slaves, a few pirates even went as far as the coast of Iceland, raiding inland to kidnap women and bring them back to North Africa. North African slave markets thrived, as, under Islamic law, known as Sharia, although fellow Muslims could not be enslaved, non-Muslims could be and were. Over a period of more than 300 years, it is estimated that 1 million white Europeans, to include those captured at sea as well as through land raids abroad, were enslaved. Many of these were Americans captured at sea. In 1794, in reaction to the attacks, Congress had passed a law authorizing the payment of tribute to the Barbary states. Part of that law was the Naval Act of 1794, which authorized the construction of 6 frigates, establishing the United States Navy. By the end of the 1700s, when Jefferson was Secretary of State, the United States had concluded treaties with all of the Barbary states, the Ottoman regencies of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, along with independent Morocco. When Congress authorized $80,000 for Morocco to not molest American shipping, it was considered a good deal, as it was a cost savings when compared to the loss of ships, cargo, and sailors. The Bey of Algiers, Mustafa Baba, also agreed, and many American merchantmen were escorted by Portuguese warships, as Portugal also had a treaty with the Islamic states. But Jefferson was opposed to paying tribute, which he considered to be a modern Danegeld. When Saxon England paid the Danish Vikings not to attack, it did not work. Although Morocco and Algiers initially agreed, just weeks before Jefferson took office, Tripoli began attacking American merchant ships in an attempt to extract further tribute. Jefferson had seen enough. Jefferson tried diplomacy, and his letter to Pasha Yusuf Karamanli emphasized, "Our sincere desire to cultivate peace and commerce with your subjects." Pasha Karamanli, the ruler of modern-day Tunisia, felt that the Americans had insulted him by not offering to pay tribute. He threatened continued actions if not so respected. Pasha Karamanli was already at war with Sweden, having broken an existing treaty after Sweden agreed to pay annual tribute and ransom for 131 captives. 14 Swedish merchantmen had been seized by Tripolitan corsairs. Some of these were white women who were being transported on Swedish merchantmen, and it is not known if they were ever recovered, as the white women were rarely ransomed. They were highly prized and sold. The Pasha then declared war on the United States on May 14, 1801 by chopping down the flagpole at the American consulate in Tripoli, a direct act of war. Jefferson sent 3 frigates and a schooner under the command of U.S. Navy Commodore.
That's all it took to go to war back then? I'm going to cut down your flag? Man, shit. They burned the flag now, so what the hell? He cut down nigga flag for time to go to war now? Oh, yeah, we serious about that flag. Shit. All the motherfuckers roll over their grave right now. Man, motherfuckers stuffing on that shit right now. You get it, both don't care.
Richard Dale as a show of force and to protect U.S. ships entering the Mediterranean through the Straits of Gibraltar. Dale learned of the declaration when he reached Gibraltar on July 1st, 1801. From that point, Dale's ships blocked 2 of the Pasha's corsairs operating as raiders and messengers inside the harbor. Yusuf Karamanli was shocked at the American audacity. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Selim III in Istanbul, was also less than amused, yet did not interfere when the Americans became involved. He had just concluded treaties with Russia and Austria and was trying to westernize his empire along Western lines. This included eliminating the white slave trade, and this position was not favored by many of his subordinate regional leaders, especially in North Africa, and they launched a revolt against him and his cousin and successor, Mustafa IV, had him murdered in 1807. He was not about to give up such a lucrative business. The U.S. blockades halted Barbary trade and raids with Europe, but did not stop Tripoli's trade with the other Barbary states. It did, however, incite the other rulers, who considered siding with the Pasha, and they expelled their American diplomats. The United States was putting a major dent into their pirate enterprises, to include the white slave trade. The possibility of Tunis, Algiers, and Morocco joining forces as a result of losing this lucrative business became a serious concern during 1802, but in 1803, Captain Edward Preble was the new American naval commander, and he was aware of the white slave trade and piracy, and he began to deal with it. On September 12, 1803, the USS Constitution arrived off the Barbary coast to confront the Tripolitan pirates. In October 1803, the frigate USS Philadelphia ran aground and was attacked and seized, and the 307-man crew was held for ransom. In response, on February 16, 1804, a group under Navy Lieutenant Stephen Decatur slipped into Tripoli harbor after dark, boarded and set fire to Philadelphia. The Pasha, in response, demanded an outrageous sum in ransom for his American hostages, even threatening death if it was not paid. In 1804, Commodore Samuel Barron, aboard the USS President, took command of 11 vessels, and he had new orders. But due to illness, he handed command of the squadron to Captain John Rogers. Jefferson had again seen enough and decided to take direct and immediate action. He sent the order. Ex-Consul William Eaton, a former Army captain who used the title of General, and United States Marine Corps First Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon would lead a force of 8 U.S. Marines and 500 mercenaries to take Derna and free any hostages. These mercenaries were Greeks from Crete, Arabs, and Berbers, opposed to the regime, and started on a march across the desert from Alexandria, Egypt in April 1805.
Berbers, black too.
Their objective was to capture the Tripolitan city of Derna. The Muslim troops were under the command of Egyptian Sheikh El Tahib, the Ottoman Empire viceroy. William Eaton, who was overbearing and not very friendly, kept himself aloof from his men and was in overall command but leading only half the group. He had a tough job controlling the largely undisciplined mercenaries, and the infighting between the Christian Greeks and Muslims, few of whom were professional soldiers, became a problem. His promises of money and loot once they took Derna was looked upon skeptically. However, O'Bannon and his 8 Marines embedded with their mercenaries shared food, hardship, water, and earned their trust. O'Bannon decided to take the Muslims from Eaton, exchanging them for his Greeks. The Marines built a strong fellowship by not denigrating the Islamic faith. They discussed their similarities and differences. O'Bannon also knew that many of these men had either been hostages themselves or had lost friends and family to the white slave trade. Eaton reported in May 1805, quote, "Our only provisions are a handful of rice and 2 biscuits a day," end quote. From March 22nd to March 30th, several Arab mercenaries under the command of Sheikh Hamid El Tahib staged mutinies. By April 8, when he crossed the border into Libya and Tripoli, Eaton had quelled the Arab mutinies, but he could not stop the desertions.
This is the most relaxing game in 2025.
In late April, his army finally reached the port city of Bomba, some miles up the coast from there, and the U.S. Navy warships USS Argus, Nautilus, and Hornet, with Commodore James Barrett and Captain Isaac Hull, were waiting for him. Eaton received fresh supplies and money to pay his mercenaries. Argus gave an additional cannon to the troops. On April 26, Captain Hull's ships then opened fire and bombarded Derna's batteries for an hour. Meanwhile, Eaton divided his remaining army into two separate attacking parties. The attack began at 14:45 hours, with Lieutenant O'Bannon and his Marines leading the attack with 50 inexperienced Greek gunners. Eaton's force was halted due to high volumes of enemy musket fire, but O'Bannon proved his men through the inaccurate fire, as witnessed from the ships. Carefully interchanging these men into various ranks to fire, advance, reload, and continue the process, O'Bannon's force took the fort cannons. Eaton, wounded in the left wrist, would report later that O'Bannon with his Marines and Greeks had, quote, passed through a shower of musketry from the walls of houses, took possession of the battery, end quote. Eaton's forces caught up and turned the defenders' own abandoned guns against them, pushing them out of the city and into a well-placed ambush set up by O'Bannon just outside the main gate. During the entire battle, O'Bannon lost 2 men killed and 3 wounded Marines, with 9 of his mercenaries killed. Eaton's losses among the Muslims is unknown. O'Bannon raised the flag over the captured city at 1600 hours. They had just defeated a force 4 times their number, who were in a fortified defensive posture. And for the first time in American history, that a flag from the United States had been raised on a foreign soil. Hostages were freed, and the Navy sank the pirate ships in harbor. Accurate naval fire from Argus and the other ships forced them back, and Derna remained in American hands. Yusuf reluctantly signed a peace treaty on June 10, 1805, aboard the USS Constitution. The treaty granted American ships passage through the Mediterranean without further payments of tribute and freedom from harassment. This also meant joining the other European nations in halting the very active and overt white slave trade. The war was over, and so was active white slavery from North Africa. Marine Corps legend has it that Hamet presented O'Bannon with a Mameluke sword, a sign of prestige and power. Emboldened by this event, more European nations also increased their naval presence and resisted the Barbary pirates, stopped paying tribute, crippling their commercial trade and extortion rackets, ending their raids on southern coastal Europe, ending hostage-taking, and their demand for ransoms and the white slave trade. Presley O'Bannon and his 8 Marines had done the seemingly impossible, but it would not be the last time Marines were called upon to do the impossible and succeed.
Okay, good little story. Okay, all right, I respect that. He went up there. Okay, you know, but my homeboy gonna be like, "Yeah, they twisted on me," but yeah, I got it twisted, homeboy. I'm sorry, man. They made sure they saved them and stopped the white slavery. They didn't care about the black slavery. Fuck it. You know what I'm saying? And then after slavery ended, you had the Jim Crow era, bro. People forget about that little, you've been free, blah, blah. You forget about the whole Jim Crow era where you can walk down the street and look up and see a white person. If you just look down, you get lynched. Well, they come in your mama's house and rape your mama. And it happened all through the South, bro. They forget about this shit. Like so many black, the word picnic comes from pick a nigga to lynch. They was hanging niggas and eating a sandwich, drinking Coke. Take a picture. They forget about this. So that's why we learned to react with violence first, because if you don't, you're going to be up in a tree. They still hanging niggas in Mississippi. They just found some slaves, nigga, like a few months, right now, like a couple weeks ago, in Mississippi. They were like, slavery ended? God almighty. Still under slavery. Like, they model their dress, but they know they can't go nowhere. Hey, what are you going to make? Get your ass in the house. So once again, it's like, come on, bro. Like, you can't compare it, bro. Yeah, we know. Okay. That was bad. Okay, yeah. But, bro, not only feeding the babies to the gators, bro. Okay. Now, I'm going to do a little 10-minute video from my side of the point of view. I'm going to let y'all do the reading. I read it several times, but yeah, just check this. Look. See? And there's so much, man. say right there. The principal whites are made up of the Saxons and the English. The Scots, Welsh, and Irish are not Saxon or English. Africa, Asia, Mexico, Swarthy, Black, Russia, and Indian, Spain, France, all black. I'm just saying.
How was George Washington and his family described during the Revolutionary War? To better understand who George Washington was, let's read from Nicholas Marceau, Earliest American Ancestor of George Washington, by John Bear Stout. Page 1. Quote, "For there was a distinct French Huguenot strain in the lineage of George Washington. It came to him from his first American ancestor, Nicholas Marceau, a Huguenot refugee who came to Virginia in 1620. This infusion of Huguenot blood into the Washington family is of special interest, both to historians and to psychologists. Let's refresh our mind on who the Huguenots are. From History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors, by Henry Copy, page 445, quote, "It has been asserted that, when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots, and that of these many emigrated at a later day to South Carolina." End quote, it is said. Fully 3.5 million Moors, or Moriscos, as their descendants were called, left Spain between 1492 and 1610. Over 1 million Moriscos made their way to France, where the vast majority of them became Huguenots. It is in France where many of the last descendants of the Almoravids, as well as other Berber groups, settled. We now know the first American ancestor of George Washington was a Huguenot with Moorish ancestry. With that knowledge, let's read how George Washington was described by English officers at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. From George Washington, A Biography, Volume 2, page 239, quote, "On the basis of Van Horn's description, added to what the traitor had said casually in his letter of himself, and of his military position. What tall, dark officer was there in America, 38 years of age, unmarried, who had an aide-de-camp and was going to participate in the expedition against Fort Duquesne? The only officer who was known to Lord Loudoun's informants, as in any way answering to this description, was Colonel Washington." On the next page. When the colonel was returning from the visit to General Shirley in Boston, Loudoun consequently asked Kennedy for a description of the Virginian Washington. Said the captain, "Was a man about 6 feet high, of a black complexion, with black hair, which he then wore in a bag, looks like a foreigner, a strong man." End quote. This image is said to be a contemporary painting of George Washington and his Moroccan assistant. Does he look dark complexioned and wearing his hair in a bag like we just read? Through my years of research, I find it amusing how beside many paintings of whitewashed individuals, there is often a brown or dark person beside. It's also interesting how the assistant is said to be Moroccan due to Washington's Huguenot Moorish ancestry and him wearing his dark hair in a bag. Apart from George Washington's description, the book also confirms dark complexion and black complexion are synonymous at the time for describing someone with a darker than brown complexion. In his younger years, Washington is also described being of a weathered ruddy complexion, a darkish red. Now, let's read how his stepdaughter Mary was described. From Mary and Martha, the mother and the wife of George Washington, page 119. Quote, "That sweet young woman, the dark lady, as she was called, because of the deep brunette of her complexion, also came to be regarded by the poor and the afflicted as an angel of mercy. I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence. Everyone knows what complexion means. This word has not changed since its first use in early modern English. However, some people might still get confused because the word brunette has indeed changed in the early 1900s. So, let's read from an early modern English dictionary published in 1768. brunette. A woman with a brown complexion, complexion, the color of the face. We have seen in our previous video how the men fighting in George Washington's company when he was still Colonel Washington looked like. Majority of the men were Europeans of dark complexions, just like Washington himself, mostly from the British Isles and born in the colonies. There were also some from Germany and Holland. Now we are going to look at the whole company. The words underlined in red describe soldiers with pale or fair complexions, while those in brownish yellow describe melanated soldiers. And blue indicates what foreign country the soldier was born in. Right from the start, we can see the first sergeant, Reuben Vass, joiner by trade, born in Virginia, is dark-complexioned, while the second sergeant, James Littlepage, carpenter by trade, born in Virginia, is fair-complexioned. View the rest at your leisure. You can easily pause the video before we change pages. The vast majority of these soldiers are brown and dark-complected, from Ireland, Scotland, and England, or born in the colonies. We can even see a dark-complexioned German. We thought all Germans fought as mercenaries on the English side. But as we can see, history is not so History is a lie. What was the fate of the Jacobites who fought to restore the Stuart kingship to England, Scotland, and Ireland? This is where I need my American brothers and sisters to listen carefully. From Jacobite gleanings from state manuscripts, short sketches of Jacobites, The Transportations in 1745 by J. Macbeth Forbes. This is from the Harvard University Library. It doesn't get more historically accurate than this. Page 48. Quote, an exact list and description of 150 rebel prisoners shipped at Liverpool on board the veteran John Rickey, master, for the Leeward Islands, which were taken near Antigua the 28th June last by the diamond privateer, Paul Marsale, commander, and carried into Martinico the 30th June 1747. I could narrate how these people looked myself, but I will let our brother Neophyte Dag on YouTube to do the honors.
We're going to look at the remarks column. These are all the names of the people that were shipped. I gave you the entire 150 names, and I want you to pay close attention to the remarks column. Douglas Campbell, brown complexion. Alex Catanock, black ruddy. Douglas Campbell, brown complexion. All these people, just keep reading the remarks column. You see all these people, brown, black, ruddy complexion, and it goes all the way through the 150 prisoner list. And I want to draw your attention, if you might say, well, they were fair skin and pale skin, and these descriptions are not accurate. Let's jump to prisoner 62. John Crookshanks, fair complexion. Let's jump to 63. Duncan MacLeod, pale complexion. So wherever possible where they were pale complexion, they'll list that, but wherever they were dark complexion. 71. Joseph Brown, dark complexion. It's telling you we're identified what the complexion is. These 99% of the prisoners were dark skin, brown skin. And I'll even jump you to prisoner 40, James Nielsen, black, swarthy. Swarthy means dark skin complexion. They're telling you this man is black, swarthy. So it's telling you where it is, undisputable. And these are all Jacobite prisoners, which King James is the original Jacobite, all dark skinned people. We'll go to prisoner 40.
I'm gonna end it right there. I don't want to keep going on and on and on really about it.
History is a lie. How were three sons of King Charles II described during the Jacobite uprisings? From the memoirs of the Secret Services of John Mackay, Esquire.
if you anybody that smart, read this book, man. You can get it from online. You can get pieces of it from online. It's everywhere. Or you can go buy it. It don't cost that much. Oh my God.
Fire, published in 1733. First off, at page 36, we have described Charles Lennos, Duke of Richmond, is son to King Charles II by the Duchess of Portsmouth. This is the depiction Wikipedia and most modern history books show us. Now let's read how he was described. Quote, "He is a gentleman good-natured to a fault, very well bred and hath many valuable things in him, is an enemy to business, very credulous, well-shaped, black complexion, much like King Charles, not 30 years old." Second, John Mackey describes George Fitzroy, Duke of Northumberland. Son to King Charles II by the Duchess of Cleveland, was one of the captains of King James's Horse Guards, which he quitted at the Revolution. This is the depiction on Wikipedia. Now let's read how he was described. Quote, "He is a man of honor, nice in paying his debts and living well with his neighbors in the country, does not much care for the conversation of men of quality or business, is a tall black man like his father the king, about 40 years old." Next. On the same page, we have two characters related to King Charles II, so I will read the description of both. Charles, Duke of St. Albans, is son to King Charles II by Mrs. Gwynn, was made by King William one of the bedchamber. This is the depiction on Wikipedia. Now let's read how he was described. Quote, "He is a gentleman every way de bon naturel, well bred, doth not love business, is well affected to the constitution of his country. He is of a black complexion, not so tall as the Duke of Northumberland, yet very like King Charles, turned of 30 years old." Below we have Charles Fitzroy, Duke of Grafton, is grandson to King Charles II. Quote, "Is a very pretty gentleman, hath been abroad the world, zealous for the constitution of his country, a tall black man, about 25 years old." By now, the pattern is clear. 3 sons and a grandson of King Charles II, of the Stuart line, were described being tall and of a black complexion, much like King Charles II. Before some smart idiot says, "No, they are talking about hair color, please believe me," ignoring the fact, complexion in early modern English meant primarily the color of one's skin. Just like in contemporary English, this coping mechanism easily disproves itself. Charles Lennox and Charles Beauclerc both are depicted in their Wikipedia images clearly having brown hair. So why are they described by a contemporary who lived at the time, John Mackey, as having a black complexion if complexion somehow means hair? Like and share for more lost history. And that's why we say,
This is Jerusalem in 1925. Why do you think the leader said, how are you guys Jews if you guys left black but came back white? How'd you leave black but came back white? We've been lied to.
But the CT scan has one more surprise for Alejandro. Shemai's ethnicity.
Well, they have just told me that Shemai had a Nubian feature, which means that their ruling family was probably Nubian, and that was unexpected.
Examining Shemai's anatomy closely, the thickness of his bones and the shape of his nasal cavity, the anthropologists think he was a black African, likely from neighboring Nubia. A huge revelation that challenges the prevailing image of the Egyptian ruling class.
We always thought the ancient Egyptian elite were Mediterranean type, and in this sense, Shemai is representing the society of the frontier, in which different ethnic groups were mixed.
They were dark skinned, but they were not black. But they're not Negro.
What? What?
Because look at the lips of the the Negroes like that and the Rose like this. It's not really the Egyptian origin at all. It's different, completely different. And this is why you cannot connect the Egyptian civilization with the African at all. It's different. Or from Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, it's different, completely.
History is a lie. How did George Washington's men who fought
I'm gonna end it right here. I'm gonna keep going on. My point's been proven. Not even the whole Egyptian thing. That was just something extra. But nobody want to accept that shit either. They ain't gonna accept that shit. Even with the whole the king of England shit. I can tell them right now how the whole story went down. The Pope gave them permission, man. They wanted all the black nobility out of Europe and make England white again. That's what they wanted. It took go look it up. 32-year war. English Civil War. Christian Crusade. That was all to get the black nobility out. You know, Moors are Muslim. Get the black nobility out of Europe. And they took their titles. They took everything from them. Queen Charlotte is black. Her son, King Stuart, is half black or a quarter black. That's why they call him Black War King. That's why he had that color. They don't want to accept that Queen Charlotte was Swarthy either. She was. So somewhere in Queen, but they bred that shit out. They had to breed it out. They ain't want it in, but they had to. It is what it is. They bred it out though. Ain't nothing done now, but it's okay. That's what they do. Man, I'm gone, man. Y'all have a good night.